Brown Bag here at Search. Everybody watching online, welcome. We're happy to have you. We have a special guest here today, Matilda from UNOY, and I'll have her talk a little bit about UNOY. But she is the leading coordinator for United Network of Young Peacebuilders, which is UNOY. And she has a background in youth activism. She participates in numerous regional and international youth organizations, working groups.
The Brown Bag Lunch on youth advocacy and peacebuilding is starting in a large conference room.
So everybody online, you didn't see it, but I called it that announcement would happen right when we began. So, but yes. So anyways, Matilda is basically pretty awesome, and she just got back from talking at the UN, and so we're going to hear kind of what she has to say today, especially around youth and youth inclusion and peace building, and how we're going to try to get that into the UN and everything like that. So I will give you the floor, Matilda.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to be here. It's my second time at Search, so I was just telling Jessica that the last time I was here was spring 2012, and I did not really know what I was doing here. But now I got to know Saji and a couple of other people, and since then we've started a nice cooperation. And I'm very happy to be back and also meet people in person that I've only talked to online. So I'm from UNOY Peacebuilders. We're based in The Hague in the Netherlands, and I was invited to speak at the side event at the UN earlier this week, and I thought I would make the most of my transatlantic trip and come to GC as well, because it's so hot here. I like sweating, that's why I'm here. Questions welcome at any point, so do interrupt me. I also have a tendency for bad jokes, so do please laugh when they're put out there. Maybe to start with a brief introduction to UNOY Peacebuilders. We're a global network of 60 youth peace organizations in 60 organizations in about 35 countries. We've been around for 25 years, so it's our 25th anniversary this year. We're celebrating that anniversary in various ways, but one way that could be interesting, I'm thinking now, and I haven't thought about, we haven't talked about this, but we're doing a publication called 25 Stories of Youth and Peacebuilding. It could be interesting for us to have a story from Search there or so. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Someone, it's a great story of someone I work with. We should tell that to the world. Because what we're trying to do with this publication and with a lot of our work is to kind of change the discourse on youth and peace and conflict from being one of youth as troublemakers, youth as victims, youth as perpetrators, to youth as peace builders. Well, obviously, there are a lot of young people that are victims of conflict. There are a lot of young people that are actively taking part in conflict in ways we would not like them to take part. But I mean, there are tons of people out there that do great peace building work, and I mean, you if anyone would know about that, and that's what we're trying to tell the world, tell the UN, tell governments, so forth. Our work is based on two main programs. One is capacity building, so we do a lot of trainings with our members. We've recently finished a round of regional trainings in Africa, and Search, the regional office in Burundi, for instance, was giving a training, or giving a session at the training we did in the Great Lakes, for instance. So there's been some cooperation in the field as well, which is really great, I think. But we do trainings on, well, it's always kind of peer-to-peer education, young trainers, on anything from, well, storytelling is the most recent one we did, in the half European participants, half participants from the Middle East, North Africa region, on kind of the power of stories, how we can use stories in youth peace advocacy, how we can use this power, and that was really great. But we also do project management trainings. How do you write a good funding proposal? Because a lot of youth organizations out there kind of struggling with simply, they might have great ideas, but how do you put them down on paper, and how do you sell them to the donor, for instance? So that's kind of our capacity building program. We also try to do more and more stuff online. Google Hangouts, Thanks to Jessica, she kind of, I mean, I knew they existed before, but I was like, oh. But she showed us how well it can work. And we also have online platforms in which our young participants come together and change the world. Now, the other pillar of our work is advocacy work, and that's why I'm here today, I think. And this might also be the big difference between Search and, say, an organization like ours, that we really do kind of active advocacy work at mainly at the UN level. Our long-term goal is a Security Council resolution on youth, peace and security, but that's nothing that's going to happen today or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but that's quite far in the future, I think. But I'm sure you're all aware of 1325, for instance, the Women, Peace and Security resolution, and the other Women, Peace and Security resolutions, and that's kind of the inspiration for this idea, because we feel that there's a lot of UN documents on children in armed conflict, but as soon as you turn 18, kind of you're out of this game. So we're trying to explain to the world that young people in conflict, they suffer in specific ways, say unemployment, lack of education, or not being able to take part in the educational system, being recruited, like risking being recruited or being recruited into armed groups, for instance. And we think a Security Council framework for this would be helpful in various different ways. Like partly, just give recognition to the great work that's already being done, because I don't know what the feeling you have, and it would be interesting to hear. But to me, youth and peace building is not really, well, it's becoming more and more a hot topic. But I think that's changed quite a lot in the past 2 or 3 years, because before then it really was not very widely talked about. I see a lot of nodding. I hope it's not like the Eastern European nodding where yes. Yeah, any comments on that? Is that just anonymous?
Not of approval, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think a lot of us who work with partners here in DC, around like 2 years ago, people kept saying like, the next step is we're going to work with youth. Like, this is the new thing. This is the horizon.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is new. That's terrifying.
No, but I was at there was this world conference on youth a month back or so in Sri Lanka, this intergovernmental conference, and the president of the UN General Assembly was there, and he was giving a speech. And before him, there was this young girl speaking, and she said one of these cliches, youth are not the future, youth are today. For very present stakeholders today, which is a cliche to most of us working in the youth sector, kind of. And then the president of the General Assembly, he started his speech with like, you know what, I really learned something new today. I learned that youth are not the future, but youth are today. Also, well, good if that he learned it now, if not before, right? But, so I think it's a cliche that's worth being repeated. But that was a bit of a track. Yeah, so our long-term goal is a Security Council resolution, but before that's going to happen, you need really a strong NGO coalition lobbying for it, and we're building that coalition. And I know Search can be a very active part of this hardcore lobbying, but we're still, I think, helping each other out in various ways with regards to this. But there are a number of big NGOs that are behind this idea. World Vision for the Safe Children, but also strong youth organizations like ICNIO, the International Coordination Meeting of Youth Organizations, and like this. So we're working on it, but it's all of us that work in coalitions in a way or another know that it's also a bit of a challenge sometimes with priorities and stuff like this. But we're also building support for the Security Council idea within the UN system, so we need a lot of UN entities, UNFPA, UNDP, Peacebuilding Support Office, people like this. The Youth Envoy, of course, I don't know if you've heard about him, but the Secretary General appointed a Youth Envoy last spring, and first everyone was like, "Yay, that's super cool!" And I mean, there's still a lot of people that think that that's super cool. But I realized at one point that there are about 25 special envoys within the UN system, so that that's a bit disappointing. Not so special, or youth not so special after all. But I mean, stuff like that also shows that within the UN system there is issue of youth in any case is becoming more and more present. Because what's clear, or to say something obvious, there's UNICEF, of course, for children. There's UNIFEM, for instance, for women. There's UNDP or UNEP for the environment. There are all these different agencies, but for youth, there's none. I don't know if there should be one. Probably not either, because it is, a cross-cutting issue and all this. But in any case, what the UN is doing more and more is that these different agencies are talking to each other about youth. So there is an interagency network on youth development, for instance, come together, talk about, okay, what do we do on youth, what do we do on youth, how do we coordinate this, which is really important, I think. Yeah.
Does UNICEF not count as youth? It's too young?
So, well, this is another issue, of course, when you talk about youth, right? Mm-hmm. Who are we talking about? In the UN, they're defining it as 15 to 24. We're defining it as 18 to 30. So UNICEF is basically working with people up until the age of 18. And it's a bit, I mean, we've been discussing this with UN people as well. Like, you can be involved in this really great UNICEF project, and then the moment you turn 18, you should basically be thrown out according to the rules. Well, luckily that's not always happening. But yeah, so they're not covering this full spectrum.
So are you advocating for creating a new UN agency for you?
No, I don't think it's. Well, firstly, with the whole financial crisis and all of this, I don't think it's. I don't think you would make a lot of friends lobbying for it. And I also don't think the UN system is already such a big bureaucracy that I don't necessarily think more bureaucracy is going to help anyone. But I mean, better coordination is something we're for sure advocating for. And what we're not very active in this, but what some organizations are very active on is like I don't know if you know, but there's a permanent forum on indigenous people within the UN. So what some youth organizations would like to see is a permanent forum on youth, which would be a forum where youth organizations, civil society can come together to tell the UN what to do in terms of youth, which is kind of cool. But it's something we're focusing on. But there are people working on this, and they're also not doing too well because a lot of people are like, oh, but that's going to cost money. Because the point is, I mean, anything you add to the UN system, someone has to pay for, and yeah, that's life, I guess. Yes, so our long-term goal is the Security Council resolution, and I'm happy to talk more about that if you're interested. We for instance, launched a report on agreed language. So I mean, a lot of things when it comes to UN advocacy, what's key is to find out what the UN has agreed upon, or what member states have agreed upon before, and then try to say, hey, but you agreed on this in this resolution, that means you should agree to this, because you're basically already saying it. So that to make sure that member states feel like they're not getting into something completely new, but to show that they're really on this path already. So in this report, what we've done is gone through a number of Security Council resolutions and looked through, found the ones that mention youth, analyzed the way they're talking about youth, and it's quite funny because, well, we only looked back until the year 2000, so we looked at 2000 to 2013, I think. And I mean, in that time frame, I think there were about 10 resolutions that mention youth, which is not a whole lot considering how many resolutions they discussed. But the interesting thing is that in the beginning, it was very much young people as problems. Young people, as the cause of conflict, youth bulge, we need to curb youth violence and stuff like this. Then they moved on to talk about, in later resolutions, it's much more about kind of unemployment, youth unemployment as a cause of conflict, stuff like this, which is better, but still not maybe where we want it. And then more recent resolutions are really talking about the need to involve young people in decision making in society at large, and really kind of this inclusive approach. And that's great. The thing is, all these resolutions are country specific. So they're on Haiti, or on South Sudan, on Yemen, on Libya. And what we're saying is that, hey, you're already saying this in these country-specific cases. These are actually global issues. Therefore, we need a thematic resolution that's not country-specific, so that's like all encompassing.
And why is this your goal? Like, what will a resolution accomplish? It's not like passing a law in a national country where it has an immediate impact on people's lives.
Well, the idea is that it would impact people's lives. Like, if a paper is passed in New York, who cares? I mean, the point is the implementation is what matters, right? And we've said that, we wouldn't, like, the whole idea is that this could change the way young people are involved in peace and conflict on the ground. And we, for instance, but for the ones of you that have studied kind of the women, peace and conflict resolutions more in depth, you know that there are a lot of troubles in terms of implementation and all of this. But I mean, they're also quite successful. They all have, so in the 1325 resolution, there's all countries, all member states of the UN need to set up a national action plan on how they're going to work on women, peace and security. That's one way of trying to make sure that there's really national level implementation. And then, national level is one thing, local level is another thing. But there are a number of countries that really have good national action plans on women, peace and security, and as I said, the implementation. Yeah. But we see it as a strong political message, because there are a number of General Assembly resolutions that mention young people in conflict, and it's got quite good language. But the point is, a General Assembly resolution, I mean, there's a million of them. Very few member states think that they're important enough to implement. They have no legal value. Like, there's nothing legal to it. The Security Council resolution is also, it's only if it's under a certain article that they're legally binding. But they have a lot more political weight than the GA resolution. And that's why the idea is that it could also be something that youth organizations or young peace builders on the ground can use to say. So I mean, that's what's done with 1325. The women are saying to their governments or to their regional level governments, local level government, hey, there is such this resolution on the UN level. You have committed to doing this. Get to it. And that's the idea.
Just a follow-up question, because I think that makes a lot of sense that, a UN resolution changes the conversation and also creates norms, right? And then hopefully that's something that youth in different countries can push for and say, listen, this is the standard, you agree to it. Yeah. And they have something to kind of back up their actions. I'm curious about the special envoy that you mentioned in terms of, as we know, some special rapporteurs and special envoys are extremely active, like Mike Kiai, and really completely change the conversation. And some of them you never hear from and you never see their work, and they just kind of go on as business as usual. So I wonder, what's your assessment of this special envoy and also the position as a whole? Do you see it as something that can really push this agenda, or is it going to be something that's just kind of another mechanism but not necessarily a useful one?
So the position is very new. It's only been there for a bit more than a year. It's a Jordan guy. He's called Ahmed Al-Dawi. And his background is, to some extent, in kind of youth civil society. He's also done stuff for the Arab League and things like this. And there are really mixed judgments of him. I would say it's too early to judge. I walked with him yesterday from his office to the UN building, and we met Ban Ki-moon and Amina Mohammed on the way, and he was like, saying hi to his friends, and I was there with him. Like, so, I mean, at least they recognized him. That's something. He's putting a lot of effort into coordinating youth inside the UN system, which is good probably, but I mean, from our point of view, the first time we met him, he said, "Oh, peace building is not really on my agenda." And we were like, "Hey, we read your terms of reference. It's mentioned in your terms of reference. It should be on your agenda, if nothing else." And But he's become a lot. We met him now, I think, four or five times, and he's becoming a lot more positive. He's very positive to the Security Council resolution. Member states were quite critical to his position in the beginning because he was kind of appointed from. Well, there was an open call for this. Who wants to become the UN youth envoy? Great job.
But they don't have to pay you, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
I figure.
Envoys shouldn't get paid.
Yeah.
They have other like hats, like jurisdictions.
Yeah.
That's your main hat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just to kind of,
Yeah.
maybe on the end of this one, what do you see? And sorry, I'm just kidding.
No worries.
Like the main obstacles within the UN system for like a strong youth envoy or for like a youth resolution, like what do you see?
Well, there are a lot of member states that are not very interested in giving their young people a voice, right? For instance, so we've done three lobbying missions to the UN in the past year. With a bunch of, we call it our youth advocacy team. We're a bunch of, we're 12 people by now from all around the world with a strong advocacy agenda. So we go to the UN, but we're still, we're not based in New York. We don't, at least the first time we met, we knew we know a few people. Like Saji helped us set up some meetings, but really, we were really new in town. So, you try to write everyone you could possibly, or think about who are the kind of key stakeholders. If you want to talk about the UN Security Council resolution, well, you've tried to reach out to the permanent members. The US was the only one that responded, but they were not super interested, unfortunately. Who else is in the Security Council right now? Who are other kind of key global players when it comes to peace building? And the sad fact then is that we managed to set up a lot of meetings with Europe. I think comes to DC for this.
I know, I'm sorry. I have to apologize for the weather on behalf of DC weather.
Thanks.
Yeah, scheduling mixed up.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like the call, right? Yeah. No, point being, it's very easy to set up meetings with Luxembourg, Switzerland, Finland, Belgium, the US, fairly easy. Latin America, also quite easy. But when it comes to Africa and Asia, we've only met people when we've run into them and someone has introduced us, oh, this is the representative of Rwanda. Hi, nice to meet you. So, I think that's already an indication of the level of interest or priority. And the fact that a lot of these, say, southern country representations in New York are a lot smaller than I think the US representation in New York, I'm sure they had like 200 people in their staff. And then, Afghanistan has, I think, 5 or something. So that makes a big difference, I think. But I think, as always, like political will. But I think that there is also a momentum there that wasn't there a while ago, and I think that the youth envoy is part of, or a signal of, and so it's, at least in part, like youth in general is growing. I would say youth in peace building, we're still need to see a bit where we're going. Any more questions, comments, concerns?
How did you decide on a common platform? As in, so you represent 60 organizations. How did you decide on a common platform, a common approach on how you wanted to move forward to raise?
In terms of advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
So we, this youth advocacy team was formed by, an open call to our network. Who, we have this because we got a grant, always. Money is number one. Not always, but often, unfortunately. And we were able to set up this youth advocacy team with the aim of advocating at the UN. And made an open call, okay, who wants to join? We had people from Iraq, Kurdistan, Pakistan, India, Nigeria, Argentina, a couple of other countries. We got together, met every week online. Okay, how do we create a strong message? How do we create a strong strategy? And then we of course, constantly kind of fed back and fed in through the networks, like just emails going out to the network. Hey, this is what we want to do. What are your thoughts? Do you have examples, kind of concrete stories that can help us in our work? So, but I mean, we're not a very political network, say. So I mean, there's not a lot of yeah, of course, if you do advocacy, it is kind of politics, right? Because you're pleading for a cause. But this is a cause that we're all now committed to, or it hasn't been no kind of political contestation so far, I guess. Yeah. Question?
Oh no, go ahead.
No, okay. I have a more specific question. All of you are familiar with Middle East conflicts all the time. How do you do, but Kurdish part of Iraq, how do you work with youth, Kurdish youth? Do you have something about that? Tell me.
Well, so in this, I mean, we have Kermanj Otman in the youth advocacy team, but for the rest, in terms of advocacy, we never do advocacy on behalf of a certain country or a certain region, say. But I mean, in our other work, we were invited to go to Kurdistan on a study visit, and we wrote a proposal on how we could work together with the government there to help strengthen.
Do you have an example of kind of project?
We haven't done anything yet.
Okay.
So all we've done is told the government we could possibly help you, especially with bringing in more kind of debating skills, critical thinking, human rights education, stuff like this. But yeah, I mean, there's been elections and budgetary issues and stuff like this internally in the government. I understand. That's it's yet to materialize, but
Thank you.
So, from what I understand, you guys did a crowdsourcing exercise. So, you're okay. No, I was just curious because I know saw just that you guys had some interesting findings on that. So.
Yeah, no, let's get to. I mean, the title of this talk was post 2015, so maybe let's get to the post 2015 stuff. People know what post 2015 stuff is. Sorry? Millennium Development Goals, exactly. So the idea is, well, I guess it's a two-tier idea. There was the Rio Plus 20 conference in Rio in 2012. And as a result, there were a lot of concerns about there not being any outcomes of that conference. But the one outcome, very concrete outcome, was to establish open working groups on certain topics to develop a new sustainable development agenda. So there's that, and then there's the fact that the Millennium Development Goals are coming to an end in 2015, and what's going to follow. Because the Millennium Development Goals, I mean, you can criticize them in very many ways, but they were this kind of roadmap, but also it's something, it really raised a lot of awareness, I think. Like, most people would know, I mean, also people not in the development sector and the peace building sector or whatever, a lot of people would know that they existed. Maybe not that they were 8 and they were this and this and this and this, but it somehow, I think it was a somewhat shared vision for the world. It was very poverty focused and very kind of developing country focused. Then I guess after Rio, this discussion started, okay, what's going to follow in 2015, 16, when the Millennium Development Goals are finished. There were a number of processes started. One more this open working group process that I've been talking about, in which governments are coming together talking about, okay, what would we like to see? Civil society has a lot of influence as well, or influence. Opportunities to speak, let's say. I don't know if that's influence. But what has been quite fascinating, and this, I mean, I've heard this a number of times from different UN people, that this is really the biggest consultation process ever in the history of the UN. So they've really tried to reach out to as many people as possible. There's, for instance, been this My World survey. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, I will.
It's that one, yeah. Sorry. So basically the idea here is that you select the 6 things you think are most important. And by now, I can't remember the figure how many's filled it out, but I mean we're talking, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna say it, but they had a lot of people fill it out. And the cool thing is that, okay, you can question, okay, this is online, what about? See a lot of people in the world that don't have access to internet, but there's actually been, for instance, the Scouts have done this huge exercise, printing forms, going around to people and asking them to vote like hard copy and then put it into or they've been in contact with the UN people running the platform, so they've been able to add these votes to, and they've collected like tens of thousands of votes that way, which on a world scale is not a whole lot, but that's something. They've changed this website, so I don't really know how to. The cool thing, what you can do here, but they changed it. Somewhere in connection with this website, and this is what can be cool in your work, especially if you're working on a specific country or so, you can see how people in various countries have voted. And you can break it down per age, per gender, and it's quite interesting. So with this, I think actually 1.2 million. Wait, I have the figure here actually. No, here. 2.1 million. Yeah. Well, 1.3 million young people out of 2.1 million in total. So I mean that's quite a lot. So what this, based on the votes on this platform, the UN Youth Envoy, it's obvious, let's say I don't think he did it himself, is looked at the top issues that young people had voted for. And the top issues that young people had voted for were, education, health, employment and entrepreneurship, governance, and peace and security. And then what he wanted to do is to get, because of course what's voted on, this vote on these 6 different issues, it's very broad topics, or it's not very specific. So what he wanted to do is to kind of consolidate youth voice, as he said, whatever that means. And he created this crowdsourcing platform, which had a lot of issues, to be honest. But the idea was that for each of these 5 topics, a civil society organization, together with a UN, one or more UN entities, moderated the discussions. So for instance, the peace and security, we moderated together with UN Habitat and Peacebuilding Support Office. So on this platform, young people all over could come with their ideas, come with their input for this post-2015 agenda. How useful is it to ask a random young person, so what's your input for the post-2015 agenda? Oh, you don't know what the post-2015 agenda is? Here's a link to the Millennium Development Goals. Not maybe the best way of, I think it would have needed a lot more facilitation, or the questions should have been asked in a bit of a less exclusive way, perhaps, because the input that we got from this platform was really of varying quality, let's say. It was anything from, the big, kind of big conspiracy theories of that are destroying the world, to and also from a lot of old people, to be honest. This was then focused towards young people, right? But there was no checker, so. And I don't know if there should have been, but there was especially this old dude who posted like several times. But conspiracy theories and stuff. Not very useful. But we were able to, no, there were a couple of ideas that kept coming up in terms of what are the main concerns of young people when it comes to these security issues. And these main concerns, we formulated, we also looked at because this crowdsourcing exercise is quite, I think it had 2,000 respondents, and how representative is that, you can question. So what we also did is look at what's already been agreed in, for instance, in intergovernmental conference outcome documents. So looking through a lot of old stuff that governments already have agreed to, and that young people have had all these bigger consultation process where a lot of young people have been involved, to make sure that it's not this is old people. Point being, it's based on other consultations as well as the crowdsourcing platform, to make sure that it is more representative than, or as representative as possible. And what we in the peace and, well, so it was also, the title was changed a bit to Peace and Personal Security.
What do you mean by representative? Representing who?
So the outcome document of this crowdsourcing exercise is this global youth call. And what the youth envoy wants this document to be is basically the voice of young people into the post-2015 process.
So is it supposed to reflect the worldwide views of the billion or so people?
No, I think no one is making those claims.
Right.
But there's been quite a strong effort in really trying to make this as representative as possible. Because you could also question how representative can anything ever be.
Right.
Especially at a UN level, when you're trying to. It's really about the whole world, kind of. But what's cool about this document, that I'll talk a bit more later, is that, for instance, it should be here at the end. Oh, it's not here. Well, there's one version of this document in which so what they did, we created this document, the ones of us that were these moderators. We published it, and we asked the youth organizations to sign on to it. And by now it has about 1,000 youth organizations signed up to it. And then, some of those youth organizations probably have about 5 people in their organization. Other ones probably have 500,000. Because, there's also, the Scout movement, which is huge when it comes to working with, or in outreach. So, I think it's a fairly okay, I think no one is claiming to say that this is all youth.
Right.
But it is, I'd say, organized youth. This is quite a strong document.
Is your organization worried at all that it'll end up with the voices of the rich setting the priorities for the poor? If people have access to the internet, are on average a lot wealthier than a lot of the world's youth, and it will just end up with people like us deciding what the priorities are for youth in poor countries?
Well, no one is deciding here, because the ones that are deciding are actually the member states, and, well, that will be a whole different story. I would say there are a lot of youth organizations like ours that have a big outreach, but that really consists of a lot of organized youth in the South. Now, organized youth, I think, are generally also higher educated, and often, many go to universities, so forth. So, surely there's also a inclusion-exclusion argument to be made there. But no, I think it's a challenge that remains for sure.
Right.
But I think, there's really been an effort, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? But for instance, the Scouts going out and collecting thick boxes, and that's also the beauty of it, of the simplicity of the questionnaire, that it is. Most of those issues are really issues that you don't need.
Right, and be educated to understand what.
It's a simpler question than, what do you think the post-2015 framework should look like? It is a bit more maybe powerful in that sense. but no, it remains a challenge. But let's look at the peace and security stuff. Yeah, so you can see then all of these 5 main issues: employment, governance, education, employment, and peace and security all have their subsections. And peace and personal security. This is it's the UN. It's all about language. It's all about what you call things. And so people within the UN system said this is how we should phrase it: peace and personal security, because this is the way it's being talked about right now. So these are the 5 issues that were the most prominent in the outcome document, and that we could find strong support for in also other consultations. So violence against youth, which is a very broad concept, and that could mean very many different things. But we thought it was such a it's a basic concept that should be included. Violence against young women and girls. Young people's participation in peace building process, which is really key to our organization. The wording here was a bit toned down to what we wanted it to be, but this is what you get when you work with the UN, because we really wanted young people's full participation in all issues that concern peace and security. Too much for them to take, but that's really been key in our consultation, for instance. Protecting people's human rights education, peace education, also came very strongly through the consultation we did in our network. And this one came very strongly on the crowdsourcing platform, how sharing development gains, or inequalities in societies, how that's a strong driver for conflict. So I think that's very good that it's in there. And there's something general to say about the post-2015 discussions as they are right now, as compared to the Millennium Development Goals. The idea is much more that it's supposed to be a kind of inclusive, that it's really a global document, that it's not only for poor people in the South, but this is a document that should be the development agenda for the world as a whole. It still doesn't have a really catchy name. I mean, MDGs, Millennium Development, I don't know how catchy that is, but I mean, post-2015 agenda, not super great, I think. Anyway, yeah. I lost my friend. I was talking about names. Yes, no, but so far in the negotiations, inequality is really a strong cornerstone of what's there right now, as is inclusion. And well, so the point is, there's been, as I said, it's been the biggest consultation process in the history of the UN. A lot of, I mean, I'm sure you've seen as well, a lot of NGOs have done their own consultation. We did our own consultation as well. You can find it on our website. We asked our member organizations about, what would they, partly how, to what extent did they feel the Millennium Development Goals were relevant in their work, and how would they like to see something new. So there's been all this input, but and UN, a lot of UN agencies have also made their own input for this, but when it comes to, at the end of the day, it's member states that make the decisions. So I mean, we can all be have all our opinions and whatever, but I mean, we're not going to decide anything. Member states are the ones deciding. And the actual negotiations about the final document have not started yet, but we'll start, or there's been kind of informal discussions, but the actual negotiations will start in a couple of months. And I mean, what we should do, civil society should of course keep pushing, but I think there's also a risk of pushing too much. And you also need to make sure that kind of governments feel that they have ownership of whatever is in there.
All right, who votes that ultimately? Is the General Assembly, or is it one of the...
General Assembly, yeah. And the idea is that, it should be consensus. So everyone needs to sign up to everything that's in there. I want to show you, so there are these open working groups that I've been working now for about 1.5 years, I think, on, that's been member states with input from civil society. And the document as it stands right now, but this is, this will face a lot of negotiations, I mean, for 1.5 years, so it will probably change quite dramatically. But, yeah, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Good luck. I mean, no, it's great, but it's a lot of nice words. In terms of peace, there's this quite general, broad writing. But the difference from the Millennium Development Goals is that this is trying to be, I mean, there's a large understanding that the MDGs were not they were too simplistic. So this is trying to be a much more, or catch the complexities of the world in a better way. And that's why there are all these kind of sub-indicators for each of the goals. Just to quickly show you the ones on peaceful societies. Here, yeah. So, reduce level of violence, end violence against children, reduce illicit financial flows. There's one that I like a lot, let me see which, or like a lot, let's say. This one I think is, well, from a kind of youth participatory aspect, this is quite an okay wording. The 16.4, increase inclusive participatory and representative decision making at all levels, taking into consideration the interests of present and future generations. Well, you can take things into account, but it's a different thing than giving a good voice to, say, young people. And of course we know that young people are not the future, right? But representative decision making, I think, is quite important because, as we know, there are a lot of countries where, well, I think every country of the world, young people are underrepresented politically. There's also this one, information and education and culture of non-violence, which is also quite good from our point of view. Yeah.
So you mentioned checking boxes. So were any of the questions open questions? And if so, was there anything that was kind of surprising that came out of, something that's a little unexpected of what, our priorities are for young people?
I can't answer that question. In the beginning, things were added to the long list, not such a long list. But things have been added to this list, things that have been coming up enough times.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, because that'd be interesting to see, if there's things that,
thinking outside of the box.
Yeah, exactly. Like if there's anything that, people find really important that we don't think to, have it make a checkbox for. So.
Indeed. Yeah. So this is kind of the document. This one is where the post-2015 agenda is at right now. But as I said, there's a year of government negotiations to come. There's been a lot of discussion whether peace should be included or not, or how it should be phrased. Should we only talk about violence, for instance? Because violence is something that, I think every government around the world recognizes that there is violence in our societies. Whereas there are a lot of countries that say, but we have peace. We're a peaceful country. Whereas in reality, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's just because I'm active on the education aspect. How do you see the MGCY, the major group of children and youth, when it comes to peace and security in the SDGs right now? Because I'm only active on the education goal. Cool. I'm not really on the peace and security aspect of it. I was wondering your...
So all these open working groups have these major groups of children and youth. There's a major group on women. There's a major group on trade unions. There's a number of major groups that are supposed to talk on behalf of civil society, right? We haven't been very active, just out of there's so much going on. You need to kind of pick your battles. But we've been following well, I read their emails. Let's say I never respond to them, and they've. No, I think they've been very important in mainstreaming youth throughout this document. But yeah, I think that's the best I can give you. I know some of the people there, and I think we've felt that we trust them enough to run kind of this part of the show.
Okay, awesome. Well, we have 5 minutes left, so if there's any other questions we want before we start wrapping things up. Any questions? Yes, let's check. I know Alicia wrote something, but I don't know if it was a question. I think it was just her expressing excitement.
Woo!
Let's try this. Oh, it was just Alicia expressing excitement. Yes, okay, awesome. Well, okay, great. So I think we'll wrap this up. Thank you, Matilda, so much for coming in today. And this is all really interesting. I know we'll be keeping our eye on for this resolution. And it's interesting for us because we usually don't work on the advocacy side of things. So it's always interesting to kind of keep an eye open on this kind of work that we.
I think we can complement each other.
Yes, absolutely. Because even though we don't advocate for one side or the other, like we definitely agree in including and inclusion, especially youth and women and everybody else that often those voices aren't heard. So thank you so much for coming, and thanks everyone online that's tuned in. Bye everyone. Yay, great.